Part 12. Now we find ourselves at Numbers chapter 21, verse 9, which says, "So Moses made a bronze serpent and put it on a pole, and it came to be if a serpent had bitten anyone, when he looked at the bronze serpent he lived." As the Israelites are wandering around in the desert, they become tired, cranky, and complainy. And long story short, Jehovah sent a plague of serpents among the people, and the serpents were biting them. This caused the people of Israel to realize that they had been sinning in their complaining and mistrusting spirit. Jehovah gave Moses instructions to make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole, and everyone who was bitten, then when he looks at what Moses made, would live. Now, as a BC era reader, what would I gather from this passage? I explained in the last segment about Abraham that it's easy to put something there that's not there because it can be allegorical in some ways, yet I have a hard time basing the foundation of my faith on this, which would be a speculative, subjective kind of allegory when nowhere in the story is a Messiah spoken of. In other words, this passage about the snakes is not a clear messianic passage and is just a narration of what went on. But for the sake of argument, let's take a look at the allegorical side of this and try to plug Jesus into it and see what we get. All right, so in the wilderness, the people were complaining, so Jehovah sent a sort of plague of snakes to the people, which caused them great pain. Crafting a snake, Moses set it on a pole or stick, whatever he had, and anyone who looked to the snake would live and not die from the harm that the snakes were causing them. To be truly allegorical, then Jesus would have been sent to cause the people harm, yet by being put up on a pole, also, being the thing that caused the harm, he then became the thing that brought healing. Let me read that again, because I think I just butchered that. Okay, to be truly allegorical, then Jesus would have been sent to cause people harm, yet by being put up on a pole, which at first was the thing that caused the harm, he then became the thing that brought healing. All right, and we know, honestly, later this thing that Moses had made, ironically, became an idol to the people, and it was eventually smashed because of how it was looked upon. And this account is found in 2 Kings 18:4. And I kind of chuckle because perhaps this part of the story is actually true today and not allegory, and not allegorical for many sects of religions. The image of Jesus on the cross has become an idol. You can't help but to find crosses hanging everywhere. And my gosh, have you ever walked into a Catholic church? Whew. In keeping with the story with the snakes and the object becoming an idol, do we need to smash crosses and crucifixes? I mean, at least to me, that part makes sense. Now, I can see how Jesus can be plugged into the concept of being lifted up onto a pole, but this passage does not indicate an intentional messianic message, nor is it clear and consistent about being so. It only takes a messianic concept in a, well, because I say it is kind of way. You have to believe in Jesus first and plug him back in. If I'm a BC era reader, this would have read as a narrative account of the people of Israel. When in John 3:14 the comparison is made to Jesus and the snake being lifted up, it is easy to see that even this author was not saying that this was a prophecy fulfilled, but rather he was just making a comparison of a similarity from his perspective. And it would seem that, just like in the story with Abraham, that the gospel authors are using allegories to make comparison with Jesus from the Tanakh. And I think somewhere down the line, as time passed, the church has picked up on them to say that they're in fact prophecies, when I don't think the gospel writers themselves saw them that way. The gospel writers use these stories with Moses as a comparison, not a prophecy fulfilled. Then again, we can use many great figures in history and compare them to events that have already passed. And again, we get then YouTube videos about how Trump and Obama are in the Bible. So making the foundation of my faith based on allegories and subjective interpretation, it's difficult for me to do. Jehovah has always told his people plainly and clearly what they need to know for the here and the now as well as for the future. Nothing has been hidden with him. So with that, let's move on to Numbers chapter 24, verse 17. And it says, "I see him, but not now. I observe him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab, and destroy all the sons of Seth. Is this messianic? Possibly. When looking at the context of this passage, though, I think we may see something else. So in Numbers 22 through 24, the chapters that precede this, what's going on is there's the story about Balaam and his donkey who spoke to him, and most people are familiar with that. Now, Balaam is a man from a pagan nation who serves King Balak. King Balak wants Balaam to curse the people of Yehovah because he is known to be a diviner and apparently able to do those kinds of things. Long story short, the spirit comes on Balaam, and yes, I guess the spirit can fall on even a pagan, and Balaam was moved to tell Balak that he could not curse a people whom Yehovah has blessed. So Balaam is given a vision of what the Hebrews would do to Balak's people, and this comes in 24 verse 14, which is right before this verse that's on the list. He is given the vision of someone who is to come. A scepter, as he is described, is a Hebrew picture of strength. This person of strength will rise out of Israel and smite the corners of Moab and destroy the sons of Seth. So this vision given to Balaam to relay the message to Balak, and that's what it is. He goes on to say that this one will rule and destroy the remnant from Ar. Is it coincidence that King David ended up doing all these things? Is it a coincidence that King David was a man of might, a picture of a scepter coming out of Israel who smote all of these nations listed above? So is this verse prophetic? Absolutely. It's a very clear prophecy about someone, but the question is who? Balak was being told that a person of strength would do these things to specifically the sons of Seth, Moab, Edom, and Ar. At the time of David, one could read these verses and then look to David and see that he fulfilled what was written about him. There would have been no allegorical or subjective views on this prophecy regarding King David. It was clearly written as a foretelling, and it was David who fulfilled these things. So could this be about Jesus too? If we try to see if this was talking about Jesus, it really messes up the context of the passage and the Bible surrounding it. That would be a really super random spot to just stop and say anything about Jesus. Jesus was not a scepter of strength when he was here, or at least how it's written about him, and he wasn't that person of power that took out the sons of Seth, Moab, Edom, nor Ar. It is said that perhaps Jesus would do this in his second coming. In the first place, I cannot help but realize there's not even a single allegorical indication anywhere that the Messiah would make two trips, and if this was to be metaphorical, the words like or as end up in the passages somewhere. This verse here in Numbers is very specific about who this one will destroy. It does not say he will smite the corners of a people like that of Moab and destroy the remnant of a people as those of Ar. No, it doesn't say that. And this would be an example of a metaphorical view of what the verse was trying to foretell. But no, it says very specifically who he would destroy. This verse is clear about what will happen, and we see that King David did this. Not every prophecy about a person is always about the Messiah as we know it. However, this is messianic actually, because it is prophesied about King David, the Messiah of Israel in his day. King David, as we talked about before, was a Messiah, and he fulfilled clearly this vision given to Balaam. No metaphors, no allegories, he just did it. This is why I put the story in the beginning of this section about the lady who was talking to the rabbi about how she sees Jesus on every page. It is easy to put something there just because if you cock your head and squint your eyes just right, you can maybe get something out of it. Making this verse messianic would be the example of being super hypersensitive and getting all excited every time a buzzword or phrase is written in the scriptures that might sound like the person that they already believe in, that being Jesus. I see it a good idea to stay true to the meaning of the text in the context for clarity's sake. You'll never go wrong there. A text without context becomes a pretext all too easily. All right, the next one we move on to comes from Exodus 12, 1 through 51. And that's pretty much the whole chapter. So for the sake of room, I won't write out or read you the whole chapter, but please, if you have a moment, read that. That's the chapter about the actual first Passover, if you will, that happens as the people are coming out of Egypt, or about to come out of Egypt. Okay, so if I'm a BC era looking for messianic prophecies, it is easy to see that I would not recognize this passage as such. This is a very telling account about the last night that Israel was in Egypt. Jesus is compared to the lamb that saves, and in such a way, it was the blood on the doorpost that brought salvation. So it is common knowledge that this would be a type and shadow of what Jesus would fulfill. The main thing that sticks out to me is that if we consider this to be a type and shadow, the Passover lamb was not a sin offering, and it only saved the firstborn male of each family, along with the firstborn amongst all the livestock. So the lamb that technically saved man, and so that lamb technically saved man and animal that night from the final plague. The lamb in the Exodus account was not able to save everyone, nor did it need to, only the firstborn of man and animal. And it was not a sin sacrifice. What about then maybe a kind of spiritual type and shadow? I don't know. Let's look at it. In John 19, verse 31 through 36, it is recorded that when Jesus hung on the cross, not one of his bones were broken, as to fulfill what is written, not one of his bones shall be broken. And this quote actually comes from Psalms 34, verse 20. And no reference is made in John to this passage in Exodus, but refers to the Psalms. As we've seen before in the Psalms particularly, when you isolate a one-liner, you can make it sound like anything you want. In the context of the Psalms, it is not speaking about any one person, but people in general. It reads, "Many are the evils of the righteous," plural, "but Yehovah delivers him out of all of them." So the righteous are plural, even though the word he is used, and this is a common Hebrew writing practice. It goes on to say, "He is guarding all of his bones, not one of them is broken." Okay, let me put that together again. So many are the evils of the righteous, plural, but Yehovah delivers him out of all. He is guarding all his bones, not one of them is broken. So in the context that's talking about the righteous whom Yahweh is delivering. If we plug Jesus into the Psalms, it doesn't sound like Yehovah delivered Jesus, nor was it taught that Jesus was righteous, yet still had many evils. You know? Like, when was it ever taught that he had many evils? Whoever wrote the book of John took this one line to somehow say something was fulfilled in Jesus. Excuse me. I find it interesting that one line from Psalms was mentioned, but the author of John does not even mention the Exodus account.